Hey everyone, during today's session I'm going to talk to you about how to advise students that are struggling academically. My name is Reed Proctor. I've been working as an educator for over 30 years. For over 10 years of that I've been advising college students, both graduate and undergraduate students. For the last 6 years I've been training groups of students how to be better learners. So when I first started advising students, particularly in the situation where a student would walk to my office after failing a major exam, my job was to give them some guidance on how to move forward. I had the question is, well, what was I going to say to them? What guidance was I going to be able to give them that would help them improve? And I quickly realized I didn't have a lot of good strategies or steps, useful steps for them to move forward. So what's the answer to this challenge? What I found is that the answer was evidence-based learning strategies. And really, here's just a small sample. These are really the books, some of the main books that I have relied on, and it's really key points from these books I'm going to share with you here in the next few minutes. The first three, I'll say these are more specifically how to help the students be better learners. The last one, Deep Work, Rules for a Focused Success in a Distracted World. That book is really more from the productivity literature, but there's a number of things there about being a focused worker that are very useful to students as well. So it's really these are the main resources I've drawn on, but there is just a wealth of evidence out there that we can draw on. If you're in the work of advising students, or if you're simply an instructor and you talk to students outside of class time, there's a wealth of evidence that we can now draw on to provide, very good guidance to students and how to help them be successful in their studies. Okay, so to get us started here, one thing to look at is, well, what are some of the low impact learning strategies we need to steer students away from? And a strategy many students rely on is just simply rereading their notes multiple times. There's maybe if their instructor uses the PowerPoint program to deliver information, rereading those PowerPoint slides many times. If there is recordings of lectures available, they will re-listen to those whole lectures, more than once if they think that is useful. These types of strategies are often referred to as repeated review. And eventually, the research points towards that, time spent doing repeated review, you quickly hit a point of diminishing returns. There's other things students can do to foster mastering the information, mastering the understanding that's being provided to them during class time. And an age-old strategy here, reviewing large amounts of material 1 or 2 days before a test, often called cramming, is that's been proven over and over. That is a poor strategy that many students implement. Okay, so the question becomes, well, what are some of the high impact learning strategies that we should guide students towards and help them implement? Well, there's the idea of spaced learning, where they're spreading their learning out over multiple days. In simple terms, they're spending time every day learning the material. Okay, as it's kind of the opposite of the idea of cramming a lot of learning into just 1 or 2 days. Our brains receive learning better if we spread it out over time. This idea of previewing, Dr. Sandra McGuire, who did much of her work at Louisiana State University, talks about this, that she cites research where if the human brain of a student has a preview of what's going to happen during a class session, they will more likely be successful during class in terms of tracking the information, taking notes, and just having a more productive time during class time if they're able to preview and they take time to preview what's going to be happening during class. And of course, this age-old strategy, taking notes in class. There's really, the research is clear. There are multiple benefits for students taking notes during class time. And so we need to really encourage students to keep working on getting better and better at taking notes during class time and to not give up on that. Retrieval practice. So On an exam, students will not have their notes when they're applying their knowledge that they learned in class into real life situations in the future. They most likely will not have their notes available there either. So they need to be able to retrieve information and apply it appropriately. So retrieval practice. So they need to practice retrieving the information before they get to their next major assessment. Transformation of notes. So students take notes in class. What should they do with those notes? Should they do anything else with those notes? Well, should definitely use those notes as a study tool, but the research shows that there is some benefit in doing some transformation of notes after class. We'll talk about that. All right, time blocking. Okay, this is really from the productivity literature. A useful thing for students to do is to identify ahead of time during their week when they'll have blocks of time, focused time to devote to their studies. Okay. A simple but powerful concept. All right. So, question: how can students implement high-impact learning strategies on a consistent basis? I'm going to offer you a framework here, the type of framework that's been promoted by many. I've tried to simplify it some, but I like to call this. People call it different things. The study cycle. I like to call it the learning cycle, and you can describe it as a framework for student success. So. And really, it comes down, you can see the student's time in three components in terms of their study. So, pre-class preparation, doing things to get ready for class. In-class engagement, which largely is comprised of taking notes during class time and other things, but the lion's share is taking notes, effectively taking notes in class and staying focused. And then post-class study sessions that should be occurring really almost every day with few exceptions. So post-class study sessions, and what do students do during those sessions to study the material that was covered during class time? All right, so this is a framework you can offer students and use this as a tool to have a conversation with students about their studies. Okay, so let's get a little bit more into this. So, and we'll look at these three components here, and this is really just a sampling of the strategies you could offer to students, or guidance you could give to students for each component of the three parts of the learning cycle. We could do a whole session on each of these components, but I'm going to give you at least something for each of these right now. So pre-class preparation, probably at least 20 or more minutes. Maybe not. We're not talking about hours and hours here to get ready for each class session, but even 20 minutes could be beneficial here. So the first thing here is if the instructor provides handouts or PowerPoint slides, is to look those over. Many college instructors use the PowerPoints to deliver information during class time. If the instructor provides those PowerPoints ahead of time, it can be useful for the students to look over those PowerPoint slides. At least the student will not completely understand the information until the professor delivers it in class. But previewing the PowerPoint slides will at least give them an idea of what's about to occur during class time. If the instructor provides learning objectives ahead of time, maybe those are contained within the PowerPoint slides or maybe in the course syllabus, that would be useful for the students to take a look at and review before class time. And of course, usually, most often, class is not a siloed unit of information is not being delivered. That material is often building on what was covered in previous class sessions. So, reviewing notes from previous class sessions that are most likely pertaining to what's being covered in the next class session. So, reviewing past notes. And then any recommended resources from the professor, from the instructors. It could be readings. It could be other kinds of handouts provided ahead of time. So recommended resources. And then I have here in light gray letters assigned pre-work. So some instructors do provide homework before each class session. That's will often comprise part of the student's grade. And that homework is often designed to get them ready for class. Maybe it's to read something and then complete a short quiz. If the instructor provides that to the student, I tell the students that's money falling out of the sky. Really, that's a big bonus because they are saying, hey, if you do this specifically, this will help you get ready for class. So that's really golden. Now, but then if the instructor does not provide specific homework assignments to help the student get ready for class, there is still things to get done. Again, spend at least 20 minutes previewing PowerPoint slides or other handouts provided ahead of class time, learning objectives, reviewing past notes, and then looking over any recommended resources provided by the instructor. And really the goal here is, and we could do a whole session on cognitive load theory, but to hopefully reduce the student's cognitive load during class time because they've at least gotten exposed, had some interaction with the information before class time. And if they begin to interact with the information before class time, they can begin to activate prior knowledge. Connections are made to previous things that they have already learned. Okay? Whereas if they wait for class for those connections to be learned, it puts too much, it can quickly overwhelm the brain here. Okay, and then, of course, another goal is to develop a mental framework that is more ready to receive information. So hopefully some of that pre-class preparation, the student is going to see what categories of concepts and information is going to be delivered during class. So they basically think of these empty containers being created in the student's brain, and then during class those containers are going to be filled in. Whereas if the student waits for class for all of that to happen at once, the containers to be built and information to be dropped in the containers, that's often students will get overwhelmed if they don't at least have an idea of what's going to happen during class beforehand. So pre-class preparation. All right, well, so the students prepare for class, and then it's time to get in class and be engaged. Well, number one, of course, is go to class. Higher education is not a low-cost endeavor. Students are often taking out loans, paying great amounts of money to be in class. So I tell them, you need to be in class to get the most out of your investment. And of course, they got to take notes. I ask them, what are your note-taking strategies? Do you type your notes? Do you write them on paper? Do you use maybe like an iPad or other tablet device to annotate handouts or slides? And I tell them, resist the urge just to transcribe every word the instructor says. They need to focus on summarizing and capturing key points. They should ask and record questions. Reduce and eliminate distractions is a big one. I ask them, hey, where is your cell phone during class? If at all possible, unless you have loved ones that are depending on you and they might need to call you during class time, if at all possible, put your phone on silent, put it in your bag. Okay, so it's out of sight. So it will not be a distraction while the instructor is providing important information. I tell them, check emails and text messages if at all possible, wait till after class. Checking those things during class can be a major distraction depending on what the nature of the communication is, and it might take 5 seconds to check a text message, but us thinking about that text message, it might take another 10 minutes for us to refocus on what's happening in class. Okay, and here's the guiding questions. And really, Dr. Willingham up at the University of Virginia, this is really comes from his material. He says students should be thinking about what is the structure of the information that's being provided during class and how is it all connected. So they should be thinking that during class time, then during their post-class study sessions, they should be able to really be trying to nail that down. What's the structure of the information? How is it all connected? So, all right. So they're in class, they stay engaged, and then they eventually need to do some post-class study sessions on a daily basis. So, how long do they need to do post-class study sessions? Here I have 2 to 4 hours of focused studying each day. It really somewhat depends on the student. It also depends on the rigor of the program they're involved in. Okay, so that there's a range here. But if a student says, I don't. Well, certainly if they say, I just study a couple days before the next test or the next assessment. And I don't really study on a regular basis after class each day. I tell them that's not going to be a recipe for success. At least 2 hours of studying every day, maybe more depending on your program of study. Here it says, and the research seems to point towards also if a student makes a plan for each study session, they're more likely to get more done during their study session, and they're more likely to remain focused during their study sessions. Transform your notes. So the students should, they take notes during class, and then really the most straightforward thing to do is to put those notes, and you can use they could use an AI tool to help them with this, and in another session we'll look at that. But make an outline of the information that was delivered in class. And why a simple outline? Because you think of an outline, you can see where the main headings, the subheadings, and the supporting points are. So, and that is the hierarchy and the structure of the information. And once they do that, they can see, it's easier for them to see how's the information connected. They can see what are the how is the information logically connected, and what are the more supporting units of information. Once the human brain can see, here's how the information can be broken up, it is more easily for us to digest information once we can see how it's structured, how it's organized in smaller units. Okay, so here it says, identify concepts and topics you struggle to remember or understand and plan to get help. Every university, there's the instructor that's being paid to teach the students. Most universities have tutoring programs or tutors that can help. They can go to classmates to discuss the material. But again, that's the key thing of daily post-class study sessions. The early identification of gaps in knowledge and understanding. So students can't, if they wait till a day or two before a test to start cramming, maybe they got a big exam on Monday, they really start, I'm going to really beef up my studying that Saturday or Sunday. If they encounter questions in the final hour of studying, if they encounter questions along the way, it's going to be unlikely that they can reach out to the instructor or a tutor or maybe even a classmate to actually get help in time if they wait until the very end to really intensely study the material. That's why it's another reason our brains digest information better if it's allowed to study material on a daily basis over multiple days. But again, just the practical thing, it allows for the early identification of gaps in understanding. Okay, all right. So for daily study sessions, another key element needs to be active recall of main concepts without looking at class notes. So the students should identify a key topic from their outline, take out a blank sheet of paper, and just simply write down everything they can remember about that topic or learning objective or key point. Okay, and then they can open back up their notes and then assess what they remembered and what they did not remember. And then there's other ways to do additional retrieval practice. We could do a whole session on active recall and retrieval practice. There's online quiz tools. You can do traditional flashcards. But there's a number of ways to implement retrieval practice. You can use some AI to help you do that. We'll look at that later on in other sessions. Okay, and then this other thing here is review past material. And I have the 20% here. That's not scientifically derived, but spending some time reviewing information that was covered earlier in the course, and then spending each of your study sessions not just looking at what was covered that day, but spending some time looking at what was covered in previous class sessions. And then once the exam arrives, the student will be very ready to do very well on that assessment. Okay, so that's a little bit about the three components of the learning cycle and what the student should do during each of those components of time. All right, so just to wrap up a little bit here. So again, we got the pre-class preparation. Students prepare for class. They stay engaged during class, largely by taking notes, and then daily post-class study sessions. The students study the material each day that was covered during class, and we covered some strategies for that. So the learning cycle, you can describe that as a framework for student success, and that's how you should sell it to the students, I would say, something like that. And it's also can be described as a tool for self-assessment. So the students can look at each component. What can I do to fine-tune my pre-class preparation? How can I stay better focused in class and do a better job of taking notes? And then post-class study sessions. Am I doing those every day? And what am I doing to make those more beneficial? How can I keep improving my post-class study sessions? And then really, I want to, here's a major take-home point. This framework can be a guide for faculty who have to advise students and others who advise students, because this is really, you can use this as an interview framework. When a student comes to my office, maybe they've done poorly on an assessment, I start asking them, well, what does your pre-class preparation look like? We talk about that. I ask them, what's your in-class engagement look like? How do you take notes and so forth? And then I ask them, what do you do during those post-class study sessions? Are they happening most days? And what do you actually do during those sessions? So this is a framework that hopefully that might help you, give you some tools to work with students when they come into your office and you want to talk to them about strategies and tools and a framework to help them make improvements in terms of their work as a learner, help them achieve their goals, and move towards better success.